Well, how about I give you a little tour of my box for those of you that haven't seen one. I have two. Actually, one of them's out with a client. So on the top, I just put these little tea towels. Can you hear me all right? Because my mic's over there. Okay. I put these little tea towels because it's more sanitary and nicer to sit on than just directly onto the wood. This hole, when you're making your own, you guys know Jif peanut butter? It's got a very like specific jar, and the lid. My dad eats a lot of Jif peanut butter. I made this box with my dad, and that's how we measured this lid, the hole. And it's 2 Jif peanut butter caps with connected, and it works perfectly to be wide enough to be able to like expose your whole lower genital region from the pubic bone all the way to the anus, and like from sitting bone to sitting bone, but not too wide so that your sitting bones fall through. And this is something to note. Women's sitting bones are wider than men's generally. And so if you have a man in your life who's interested in sitting on this, you may think about that as part of the design. And we can talk about the benefits for men some other time, or if you have direct questions about it, but just like a little heads up as you're making them. That's how I got the dimensions for this Jif peanut butter. On the underside of the lid, this is kind of important to have these stabilizers that sit inside the box. It's not perfect, but so that you can sit on it without sliding and feeling unstable. Make sense? That was pretty smart. I designed that myself. Okay, on the inside, this is all, by the way, through my website. I have the livingpelvis.com. I have a resources page, and then there's all of the things you need for vaginal steaming, all the links for all of this stuff, for boxes from my friend Kitara, who has a full-on women's carpenter team. She builds boxes out of Maine. They're very high quality and beautiful and affordable. She also does herbs, and that's the links for both the boxes and the herbs are there. As well as for this little Japanese pot, which is cast iron and cute as hell. And then that heating element down there, which has a cast iron top. And I like the cast iron or ceramic either, because they hold heat well and it's consistent and it doesn't go up and down too much. So today, I don't know if you can see. Today, I have my herbs just free in there. Sometimes I put them in a tea bag, but they're just free floating because I'm at my office and I didn't think to bring tea bags with me. That's just sitting there steaming, sort of simmering away, waiting for me. When you have a consultation, depending on what's going on, there are 4 generally. Most women in the vaginal steam community follow the lead of Kelly Garza, who's doing most of the like professional development. Her company is called Steamy Chick. She does a vaginal steam certification. She has a newly developed hydrotherapy institute where she's helping women do all kinds of wonderful things around supporting women in birth and in menstrual health. So I think that's pretty much why we all generally work with these 4 main herb blends, and therefore kind of treating 4 like kind of specific categories of menstrual cycle dysfunction or imbalance. So there's a blend that helps with cleansing, helps the uterus really release. There's a blend that helps nourish the uterus and helps to strengthen it. There's a blend that deals with excess heat. So kind of, even though it's hot steam, it cools the body using herbs. And then a blend that works to specifically around disinfection when there's high levels of bacteria or yeast or herpes. Could be just bacterial growth from there not being a uterine cleanse. a proper uterine cleanse ever in a woman's life. And so when you get your consultation, that's why having a follow-up is good, because after a couple months, maybe you needed a disinfecting blend at the beginning, but once your body's started figuring out how to cleanse, and when you're working with this protocol, you don't necessarily have to keep using the disinfecting blend, then you can probably back off. Just as an example of how these herb blends are used and prescribed. Sometimes if I have been feeling extra stressed out and like I notice adrenal fatigue or sluggish digestion, or if I notice the blood was really light during my menstruation, I might switch from using a cleansing blend at the beginning. I might switch to a more nourishing blend at the end of my cycle. Typically, everybody steams right before and right after their cycle, depending on what other situations might be going on. I might also have a woman steam like every day for a short period of time and then change it up in 3 weeks or something like that. Depends. So, sometimes it's one blend at the beginning and a separate blend at the end. So it's nice to have just kind of a little repertoire. And I am not an herbalist. I don't do my own blending. It's something that it's not my wheelhouse. I don't have that training. So I resource that out. But if you are an herbalist and you have specific knowledge about plants this way, great. You can start playing around with making your own herb blends under these same themes. If you're ever at a place where they have just one general Yoni steam blend, I would be cautious, because then that does not take into consideration all the nuance around how powerful herbs are and how they affect women differently, and how different symptoms should be treated with. Like, you could actually get in trouble if you treated a woman who needed cooling herbs with a nourishing blend, for example, a blend that's really warming. A lot of the diagnostic tools that I use for menstrual cycle analysis came from thousands and thousands of case studies of vaginal steam practitioners like me, watching what happens when women's bodies respond to the steam. And it's pretty miraculous how women tend to, once they've worked through balancing out the way that most of these imbalances happen. Some of you have had a vaginal steam consultation with me, and some of you haven't. The imbalances take up themes. They look similar in certain group in certain ways. There's uterine fatigue, stagnation, weak digestion, excess heat, blood deficiency. But when you start to understand the themes and how these, it's sort of like from an Eastern medicine perspective, our diagnostics are heavily influenced by Chinese medicine and Ayurveda, and understanding the body from kind of these Eastern energetics, which is not really how Western gynecology looks at and approaches the cycle. In fact, they mostly just prescribe hysterectomies and birth control pills. So when you start to understand and see these themes, the menstrual cycle is considered the 5th vital sign. It's just as important as blood pressure, and tells you a lot about what's going on in your body systemically in greater themes. But just, you can sense it, and it can be detected in your menstrual cycle sooner. So you can tell by watching your blood whether you're leaning towards anemia. If you're not getting enough nourishment, you can tell by watching your blood if there's too much heat in your system, which could be caused by diet, by environment, by toxins that you're ingesting. It could be hormonal. You can tell by watching your blood if there's not enough circulation and movement happening in your body, if there's stagnation. And you can address that directly with a lot of things we're learning about here in the infradian rhythm. But really, like, if you did nothing else but vaginal steam, that creates a huge amount of movement. Steam stimulates energetic and blood and lymph movement in the body in the pelvis and the uterus more directly than anything else that I've ever come across in my 15 years working with the pelvis this way. That's why I'm such an evangelical about it. It really does. It's almost like we do a little bit of research and then the body does all this magic. We just got to get the like protocol and the herbs kind of right. And then the body just like, hell yeah, I know what to do with that. And I know how to make this perfect. I know this is so old and familiar to me. And it's really just about like proper stimulation. The body knows what to do to find health. It's always working in that direction. Whatever is going on, whatever these imbalances are, we get such a pathological perspective in Western medicine, like there's so much wrong and we need to fix what's wrong. Well, no, when we look at it, like it's really the body expressing what's right and giving us a ton of information. We learn to listen to the information, work with it, move with it. The body's like, boom. So over the course of the last, I don't know, I think probably close to a decade now, as we've been compiling all these case studies, women's menstrual cycles after they've healed their imbalances tend to look the same. And that is blowing people's minds. That is definitely not what Western medicine teaches. That gynecology says that your menstrual cycle as it was when you were first starting to menstruate is your norm, and that everything should be baselined upon that, not upon what healthy standard like norms that we're seeing once women get over their initial, it's like when you start an engine at the beginning of a car's life, the oil has to learn how to move through the whole engine. There's all these parts that need to lubricate themselves and working in a chorus, and expecting women's menstrual cycles to just start running like race cars when they turn 13 or whenever they start menstruating. That doesn't make any fucking sense. And so comparing that as the baseline, that's just not sensical. It doesn't make sense. So that's where we go wrong in a lot of ways. And I think I've maybe been on a soapbox about this before, but prescribing hormonal birth control to young girls is one of the most horrible things I can think of that we're doing to our population in general, but to women in particular. That shit is toxic, and it just turns the reproductive system off. Whatever beauty was starting to kind of coalesce, and whatever music the orchestra was beginning to sort of figure out just gets halted. And then when a woman gets finally off of that shit when she's 10 years down the road or whatever, her body has to go through that whole situation again of trying to get things to orchestrate. And it can be really, really frustrating. And so vaginal steaming helps that process. And it also helps a woman's body find that homeostasis point, which for most women looks shockingly the same. Around 28 days, the whole cycle, bleeding for around 4 to 5 days, even, not clotty, not stringy, bright red blood, not flooding, not painful, no hormonal acne. All the things that are associated with PMS are like actually symptoms of there being something off, some menstrual cycle imbalance that needs to be addressed in general. And things get out of whack. We ignore it for long enough, and it creates bigger situations like fibroids, endometriosis, PMDD, infertility, air quotes around infertility. So that's why I'm such an advocate. It really is a beneficial practice for everyone, regardless of whether they've just had a baby or not, which is when it's especially helpful. Stimulating a uterine cleanse and helping all of that old material get its way out of there. Yes, women's bodies are self-cleaning, but we're also in really toxic environments. We ingest toxins every day, whether we know it or not. And we're often forced into lifestyles that don't honor our rhythms, which make us contract, which pull on the uterus and tilt her out of alignment and create an unnatural situation from which it's difficult for her to do a natural cleansing job. Does all that make sense? So Yeah, vaginal steaming also helps the uterus find its natural alignment, because when your body relaxes, when all those ligaments and the pelvic floor musculature relax, they're no longer pulling her out of alignment. And then you can help guide her back into place with gentle massage, or sometimes steaming does it itself. It just wants to find a neutral position inside of the pelvis. Sometimes all of the issues have an actual like physiological alignment problem. And so when vaginal steaming helps with that, then she can empty. It's sort of like a foundation, a bedrock of a greater conversation around postpartum health, around slowing down and not trying to get back to life too fast. In the my doula training, specifically around my Ayurvedic doula training, the 40-day window after birth is an incredibly sacred and spiritual window where the woman is literally blown wide open in every way, psycho-spiritually as well as physically. And when women jump back into their lives too soon, it causes some really deep destabilizations and a disconnection from her body, from earth, and from healthy patterns of healing. So that's kind of what got me into this in the first place. When I was a doula and I was working with women in postpartum, I got very passionate about it. I've studied it from two different organizations, from the Arvigo Institute, which is where I studied Mayan abdominal massage. And this is a practice that's still very healthy and alive in Central and South America, and direct lineages through Rosita Arvigo helped us understand why it's been so important, and also why it's been like buried. And then through Steamy Chick and Kelly Garza. So those are, I'm just name dropping in case you want to do research on your own about why I'm so excited about this. It's sort of spark your own evangelical. So again, this is in just full disclosure, my designs to make you all evangelical vaginal steam advocates, because your sisters are hurting, whether you have trespass experiences or not. Many that do. I think the stats of reported trespass are something like 60% of women, which means it's probably more like 90. And the body holds tension and memory, and the water in your body holds this imprint. And there's so much you can do with, getting out of the traumatic situation. There's so much you can do with therapy. And there's so much you can do with healthy partnerships and repatterning in relationship. But there is a missing piece in what I see in this greater conversation around trespass and trauma, sexually specifically, that doesn't necessarily empower women to re-imprint with themselves and find safety and wholeness and a feeling of mastery of their own sexuality, of their own energy and sexual energetic, which, I mean, this is the big work I feel like women are kind of doing in a lot of different ways, from a lot of different angles in this time in the world. And it's really, really big, because we've been in patterns, oh my God, of really, really horrible patterns around demonizing and diminishing at the best, and torturing women at the worst around how powerful and mystical their sexual energy is. And I don't know, I've been asking these questions of women for 15 years, like, what were your first sexual imprints? And 9.9 times out of 10, there is some greasy layer of shame or guilt or violence or trespass associated. There was it was kind of co-imprinted with something very uncomfortable. This beautiful, natural, innately like 100% of the earth. Spring is so fun for me because I'm so excited to look around and just see sex happening fucking everywhere I look. Everything is sensual. And that this is like the gift of the feminine in a way. Is we are vessels of this energy. And I dream of a world where women are walking around, hold in that energy again, hold inside of themselves, holding themselves, understanding and knowing the power of that, and not feeling the uncoupling of the shame and the guilt and the fear and the trauma from this very innocent, beautiful. It's like a balm for the soul, for every living thing on this planet. And so that's really at the deepest, corest, biggest reason in my heart about why I'm so fucking passionate about vaginal steaming, because in my journey, oh man, I mean, I think I've spoken to this. I was trespassed at age 5 and then repeatedly throughout like 10, 11, 12. And like my first imprints were really screwy. And then I played that out throughout most of my teens and 20s, having very confused relationship with what my sexuality got for me, which was in a way kind of making up for these attachment wounds that I got at a very young age. And only, you know, like in the last decade or so have I started to uncouple that and experience what feeling sexual in my body every day in some degree connected to that in a safe way has given me. And this in and of itself is kind of like how I feel that I get to be spoken from the earth up through my body, where the muse is actually like communicating with me through the earth. It's because my vessel has uncoupled the channel from which this communication happens. Does this make sense? Yeah. I know it's really esoteric. So we can talk about it a lot, and we can do a lot of great therapy, but unless we're working with our own energy ourselves, and sometimes alone, sometimes we have to do a lot of work with others to kind of clear out some of the biggest, you know, boulders until we're ready to hold our own energy. And sitting on a steam box and titrating that slow re-imprint of that relationship with ourselves is kind of like the most accessible way I have found to introduce women to that process. And it's 10 minutes at a time. It's 10 minutes at a time over time. 10 minutes at a time. We can handle just about any kind of intense experience for 10 minutes, right? And so it's the long game, and it looks different for every woman. And I just want to underline that this is what wants to happen already. It's already moving up and through. It's already coming. You don't have to do, and you don't have to put a motor on it. You're in the current. It's already happening. And you just have to sit there and let it happen. All the activity that we do to hold ourselves away from that sexual and innate intelligence is about pushing away. And so when we get to a point in our healing journey, which I believe all of you are at, because you wouldn't be here if you weren't, then you're ready to kind of slow down and relax the pushing away and sit in whatever's coming up and arising in the absence of that rejection inside. So what happens physiologically is there's stimulation of your genitals in an environment where no one else is present, no toys, not even your own hands, but you're holding space, and this very, very gentle stimulation is giving you a little doorway to kind of peek into somatically with what's there, coupled with that stimulation. And just a small amount, it's just a little bit for you to peek into that. And then after 10 minutes, you can step away and sit and be with whatever comes up with having visited that connection. And things unravel. You don't have to do anything with it. It just unravels, just having seen and visited it. having a like a good connection with your young one begins to become like tangible and possible, where these traumas and trespasses happen. Just through this practice of sitting still and allowing yourself to be touched. And for most women, even if they're in loving long-term relationships, this is the most pure and innocent, non-greedy touch they've ever experienced. There's just nothing like that. There's nothing like that I have found in my life, even with the most like loving, adoring partners. There's still another person's energy that we, as human beings with a social nervous system and a deep desire to be part of a community, somehow mold ourselves around. And it's really, really gone. You don't notice how much you do. I don't want to even call it pleasing, because that's sort of pathologizing it, but there's something just so pure about visiting your sexual essence when it's just you and you have no one else wanting of it. Yeah. So it's fucking revolutionary. The stillness that has come for me around, just around holding myself in that energy and noticing how that energy moves in me in relationship. Like in a way, I call it muse, but in a way that's the same. It is what helps me understand what I should be part of and what I shouldn't be part of. That goes for like what I want to eat and who I want to be around and the rooms I stay in and the music I listen to and the people that I work for or don't, and all of that. So just imagine, like, you can understand why this has been so violently opposed. You know, women walking around with this much autonomy and this much understanding of the deep forces that cause plants to blossom in the spring, like the earth, it's the earth. I'm kind of running on fumes here as far as like logical articulation goes. I think you guys, looks on your faces, you get what I'm pointing at. Yeah, no wonder it's threatening. It's fucking unshakable. So that's what I want for you.